Hi, welcome to the Maintaining a Healthy Salesforce org webinar. I think I've met a lot of you before. I'm Alison Phillips, one of the technical solution consultants at Economic Change, and I work largely on the support desk. I'm going to take you all off mute so that you can contribute if you need to. And then you can ask questions during the webinar. Okay, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Martin, who I think a lot of you are already have already met. Martin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello guys, I think a lot of you know me, and I'm here this morning because today is a little bit of a special seminar in that it's a bit of a showcase for this new support feature which we are offering people. So there will be some people joining today who are not necessarily being supported as part of a support contract or have bought into these support seminars. And I hope you enjoy today. I hope you find it useful. And I would like to remind everybody, including everyone that is a paid-up member of these seminars, that this is a dynamic scenario that we have here. We decided that we give a lot of value to our customers if we reach out to them and talk about topics that you want to know about. So if you if you find this seminar useful, then there is a roadmap which we would like to work our way through in terms of topics which we think you should know about in terms of Salesforce. But if there are things in that roadmap which need to be brought to the fore, then the communication methods which we have, such as chatter and talking to Alison and myself directly, we would like you to employ those so that we know what you want to do. And if there are any other topics which are not on our roadmap, which you feel strongly about, then we can put it to the group for a vote, and we can come up, as I said, with a dynamic syllabus for these webinars, which hopefully will prove incredibly useful for you. So in it to win it, I suppose, is our motto. And we very much look forward to working with you guys in developing this format and developing the content of these webinars as we move forward. But that's what I wanted to say. And obviously, I work with Alison. A lot of you may know me as the Supermums trainer, which is what I am. But I also head up the support desk and work very closely with Alison in supporting all of our customers, which is, of course, what we're doing this morning as well. So if no one has any questions for me, I'm quite happy to answer any. She'll hand back to Alison, and she'll take you through, which I'm sure she's already run through it with me, is very enlightening, and hopefully you'll find interesting seminar this morning. Does anyone have any questions for me they would like to ask? Or shall we just let Alison proceed?
Okay.
Okay, right, over to you, Alison, and I hope it all goes well. I'm sure it will do. Speak to you later.
Great. Thank you, Martin.
Good luck.
Okay, as Martin said, in terms of contribution, if there are topics or feedback that you'd like to provide, I think that all of the support clients and Supermums should now be part of the chatter group. And I'm in the process of setting you all up on Litmus for accessing the webinar content. So if you can't access those two parts, please could you drop me an email on the email address that's on screen at the moment, and I'll ensure that you can access Chatter and Litmus. Chatter's already set up, and I'll have Litmus fully set up by the end of today. Okay. Right, so onwards with all your healthy Salesforce orgs. So to start with, if I can actually start working PowerPoint. There we go. What do we mean by a healthy org? Well, when you first go live with your new Salesforce system, you've got a lovely shiny org with data that's hopefully been scrubbed and is all clean and perfect on day one of your system. You've got employees and users who have been trained in how to use it. the system has been built according to the design for your current requirements. But then things start to change. Users come and go. Maybe your processes change. The data may, if it's not being actively managed, may start to become less accurate. And then you've got all these other moving parts. Salesforce is releasing new software 3 times a year. The non-profit success pack is also being constantly updated. You may well be building new processes and new fields. And there are all these other changes that are going on within the system. And it's constantly evolving. There are all these moving parts that all need some form of monitoring. And this is just sort of a more diagrammatic path diagram of those items that need to be monitored. With regard to security in particular, it's not with the users, new users coming and staff changes. It's not just the training that needs to be considered. It's are your security controls sufficient? Can people see what they need? Can people see an update too much? And data management is almost a webinar in itself in terms of the processes that need to be in place and the reports that you can use for constantly managing and monitoring your data. Okay, so all of these different things that need to be monitored, it can seem a little overwhelming in terms of where can I start to make sure that things are being maintained correctly. Well, the good news is that Salesforce and the Nonprofit Success Pack provide 3 quite comprehensive utilities which will give you reports for areas that may either need reconfiguration or data that isn't set up correctly. And I'm going to run through each of these 3 in turn. Okay, the optimizer and the security health check are both provided by Salesforce and are accessible in the setup menu, and the health check is in the non-profit success pack, so that's found in a page tab rather than under the setup menu itself. So if we start with the optimizer, which is by far the most comprehensive of these reports, I ran it yesterday just in my dev org, which has got very little in it, and the report ran to 77 pages. So my intention is to have a quick look at the optimizer, and then hopefully, time permitting, we can look at that in more detail at the end of the webinar. But if we now, so optimizer, as I said, is found under the setup menu. It's very straightforward to run. You go into setup, find optimizer, click run optimizer, and the report will be emailed to you. Sometimes it may be a matter of minutes before it arrives, but you may need to allow a few hours. And this report covers all sorts of items. It covers security, your configuration, data. It also looks at new features that you may not be utilizing, which may be relevant to your implementation. And then having run this report, it's worth focusing this. These color schemes on the right hand side, the recommendations within the report will be color coded according to a traffic light system. So you've got, it's quite hard to read that, isn't it? The green icon indicates it's all is well, so no changes required. The yellow means that it's might be worth looking at this, but orange and red are the areas that you really want to focus on in terms of the items that are most likely to require some attention. And then purple, as I mentioned before, is items where there is a new feature or a more recent feature within Salesforce that might be relevant to you. And within this report, I've put a couple of links here with places that could provide information that may help analyse the reports and know where to start. There's a trailhead and there's a comprehensive Salesforce help article. Some of these items will be straightforward to fix, and some of them you may want to consult with us if it's a more complex issue. So if we have a quick look in Salesforce as to where you find all right. Can everybody see my Firefox screen? Can everyone see Salesforce?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. That's good. So I've got two screens and I've been having a bit of a problem working out which one is being shared today. Okay, so within Salesforce, to find the optimizer, you need to go into Setup. There we go. And even within the setup menu, there's some paths to follow to find more information, some general tips on running the report and where to get more help. And literally just press Run Optimizer. And then sometime later, you will receive as I said, my report from yesterday is a 77-page report, which covers limits that you may be reaching, field usage, then there's sort of your user adoption, which browsers they're using, some of the security settings on your users. As I said, pretty comprehensive in terms of the items it looks at. And if we have time at the end of the webinar, I'd like to look through that in more detail. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, so if we now pop back in and look at the other two out-of-the-box reports that Salesforce provides. In addition to the Salesforce Optimizer, under the Setup menu, you'll also find the Security Health Check, which is actually just called Health Check within the Setup menu, but it's worth differentiating that from the MPSP Health Check. So emphasize that this is the Security Health Check. It's also found under the Setup menu, and it looks at things like your password policies and your session settings. This is a much more, the results for this will be much briefer and should be reasonably quick and easy to fix. To run the reports, you just go into the setup menu, and you will be presented within the setup menu with the report results. It's not something that's compiled outside of Salesforce. It just remains underneath the setup menu, and it also gives you options within there. There's a fix risks button that gives a one-click fix to the items that it highlights. But then there's also, not everything has a fix risks button. Some things have an edit, which then take you to the appropriate place under setup for editing those settings. And as on the other two slides, there are two articles where you can find more information about the health check. A lot of the items should be pretty straightforward to fix. It's fairly intuitive what a password policy is. And as an organization, you may already have a policy about password settings. So you may already know what you want those password settings to be. For the other the less obvious settings, you may want to consult with us to get some advice. But if we have a quick look under the setup menu again, Okay, so I think as I have already done the security health check trailhead within this org, on the whole, this org has quite a healthy security setup. So you can see here, there are a lot on password policies, a lot on session settings, so the individual sessions where your users are logging in. Again, back to passwords. So these ones here, as I said before, there are some which have got a fix. There's fix risks up here. And some things. So I think we've fixed everything that can be done underneath. Actually, no, so there we go. These ones here can be fixed within this window, just by changing the settings so they automatically comply. So this will change the maximum login attempts from 10 to 3. This will enforce the content of the password, for example. So these can be done straight in this window here. Okay, and then in addition to that, the sessions. So if I want to edit the password policies, I can edit it through there. And it's taking me to the appropriate place within the setup menu. And I can change the maximum login attempts or whichever other password policy settings that I want to change. Okay. So that's the second of the out-of-the-box reports. The third one is specific to the non-profit success pack. I know that a lot of our clients are using the non-profit success pack. So does anyone not heard of this before or is not familiar with the non-profit success pack? Okay, so along with the components that are provided within this package, all of the objects and screens and the code, this also contains a health check which automatically runs a variety of tests which look at the configuration and the data specific to the non-profit components that have been installed. As I mentioned, this one isn't run within the setup menu. It's run it's under the NPSP settings tab, which may or may not be automatically visible within your app. You may need to go and go into the list of all the page tabs to go and locate the NPSP settings tab. There's a lot of useful settings and other information under there, so it's well worth adding that to your app menu. So to run this, you go into the NPSP settings tab, scroll right to the bottom, find System Tools, and then Health Check, and then run the health check. The results are presented on screen rather than in a report, and should be available fairly quickly. And we will go in and have a look at some sample information in a moment. As with the other two items, there are a couple of resources there for finding more information. And again, a lot of the issues may be reasonably straightforward to fix. And some of them, particularly when there are data issues, the NPSP have also provided a couple of utilities which you can run to automatically fix data issues. Another common error can be with the account model. So whether using the household model, individual or bucket account, so how your accounts are structured or your organizations are structured above the contacts. A lot of the issues, a common issue rather, is that there may be discrepancies within that data or it's not using the currently recommended model. So that can be more complex to understand some of the ramifications of changing your account model. For those sort of issues, you may want to get in touch with myself and Martin. Okay, so popping back into Salesforce, this time we come out of the setup menu and your MPSP settings should be available there. If not, there's always the option of finding it underneath the app launcher. And that's slowly coming back up. Okay, so as I said, we go right to the bottom and find System Tools, Health Check. Okay. So if I tick on this box to start with, the Show Past Tests, that can be quite interesting just to see all of the tests that are included in this report. And the data discrepancies that I just mentioned, common errors that I've seen are where there are multiple opportunity contact roles, or where a contact has been added twice underneath an opportunity as a role. And another one is that where opportunities are missing payments. I can't find that. Oh yes, opportunity payments. Excellent. So if we have a look at this one here, 31 opportunities should have payments and missing those payments. So that maybe if your settings are suggesting that every opportunity should have a payment, then the easy way to fix this is to go into, as the message there suggests, you can go into the bulk data processes and run the create missing payments job, which if we scroll back up to the top, if we go into bulk data processes, and these are all of the bulk data processes that can be run within the Nonprofit Success Pack. Here we go, create missing payments. And there is some warning message as to what payments will be created. And then that will fix the missing data. So if we now return to the health check, so the opportunity payments issue has now been fixed. If I rerun the health check, that message should no longer show up. The other error message, opportunity stage pledge, does not exist or is not active. And so again, that's something that can be fixed quite easily by going into the opportunity object and creating an opportunity stage. There are some stages where the Nonprofit Success Pack expects that stage to exist, even if you don't want to use it for all of your record types. Okay, any questions? Okay. So these are the 3 out-of-the-box reports which are provided by Salesforce and the MPSP. The latter 2 that we looked at are reasonably quick and straightforward. The first one is somewhat more comprehensive. But in addition to those reports, there are some quick checks that you might like to be looking at just on a reasonably regular basis. It's well worth becoming, I think when you first inherit a Salesforce org, or you first become an admin, it can seem very confusing as to what's underneath the setup menu. But it's well worth gradually becoming familiar with what's there. And these particular areas are well worth keeping an eye on, in particular the system overview. So if you go into the setup menu and go to Setup Environments System Overview, you'll see a screen which shows what your current entitlements are in terms of how much data storage your license allows you to have, how many user licenses you've purchased, and what type of license, for example. It also shows a couple of other limits like how many API calls have been used in a certain period of time. But the ones that you're most likely to be interested in are your storage and your licenses. So it shows what you are entitled to and how much of that you're actually using. It's also worth keeping an eye on the login history, particularly, for example, the Salesforce is no longer going to support older versions of IE, and does have some system requirements in terms of which browsers people can and can't, are and aren't supported. And if you look at the login history, you can see who's logging in and when and where from, because there may be people who are logging in from external applications. But one use case that we did have recently in another client was ensuring that everybody was using supported browsers, so that when a particular version of IE was going out of support, we could make sure that those users had access to and knew how to access Salesforce through a supported browser. So that's the system overview and the login history. Critical updates. Salesforce are constantly making, in addition to the regular releases, they're constantly applying bug fixes and small fixes into Salesforce. And these can be seen underneath the critical updates section of the setup menu. Each update will be given a short opt-in, well, actually some of them are quite long opt-in windows. And it's well worth testing those critical updates and checking them before you get to the end of your opt-in window, because if you activate them before they have to be activated, then if it causes any issues, you have the option of deactivating it and fixing that issue. Whereas if you wait until it's auto-activated at the end, there's no time to fix any issues that it may cause. Having said that, the vast majority of critical updates will not cause any issues in your organization. But it's well worth having a look, activating them either in a sandbox or at least within off-peak hours in your org, so that you can just check whether or not there are likely to be any ill effects. Within each update, each update contains a description of what's included, and it may be obvious from that description that it isn't relevant to your organization, particularly if it's only specific to particular features that you're not using. But if you are concerned about that, then do put it into a sandbox first. And then the last item on this slide is advanced error checking. These probably aren't areas that you will need to look at, but it's still worth knowing what information is being logged underneath the setup menu. So within the underneath Apex jobs, you'll see a list of all of the Apex that has been run recently in your, all the Apex jobs, sorry, that have been run recently in your organization. And if any of them have failed, because depending on how it's set up, the Apex job may or may not send out an alert. If it's running asynchronously, just let that wash over your head for a minute. If it's running in a certain way, there may be occasions when Apex jobs do not send an email alert, but these really are advanced options, and it's just sort of there for your information. And ditto for the duplicate error logs. If there are items which are preventing your duplicate rules from working correctly, those errors will be shown underneath the setup menu. Any questions? Okay. Does anyone want to look at those items underneath the setup menu now, or are you happy to look at those sections separately in your own time?
I was actually looking while you were talking, kind of half screen, so it's easier.
and does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So in that case, let's hop forward onto the major release schedule. So as most of you are probably aware, Salesforce is upgraded 3 times a year. So every 4 months, your Salesforce system is upgraded, and you'll see the friendly little icon changing from summer 18 to winter 19. So we now have the snowboarding character, and then come spring, there will be another character coming into production. And the schedule is well publicized and available on the Salesforce website. Before your production system is upgraded, that update will be available within any sandbox organization, sandboxes in your organization, and it is well worth becoming familiar with new features as well as any impact the release may have on your existing configuration. So it really is recommended to have a look at the new release within a sandbox ahead of time. There's a very comprehensive help article on the Salesforce website about how to prepare for a release and another trailhead in terms of previewing what's coming up, testing in a sandbox, and just being familiar with the potential impact it may have on what's coming up. The MPSP has a much shorter release cycle. Every 2 weeks, bug fixes and enhancements are being put into the non-profit success pack. A lot of that will remain entirely invisible to you and may not have any impact on your day-to-day use of the system. And unless you are on a very old version of the non-profit success pack, those updates will be pushed into your organization automatically every 2 weeks. It is worth checking. I don't imagine that any of our clients are currently on the old version of MPSP, and I don't think there are very many people left on the old version of MPSP, but it's worth having a look at, if you go into the setup menu, into that place, setup apps, installed packages, you can find, you'll see listed on those installed packages, you'll see the non-profit success pack. The vast majority of people will be on version 3 onwards, which means that that changes are being pushed down into Salesforce every 2 weeks. But if you're on an older version, then that will need to be manually updated, and that's probably something that you would want support with. But as I said, it would be unusual to find somebody who's on that old version. So what happens with the fortnightly releases is that all sandboxes will be upgraded first, and then the following weekend production organizations will be upgraded. And to get more information about that, you can have a look at the Power of Us group. It's well worth joining the Power of Us community. I don't know how many of you have already signed up to one or more user groups within Power of Us, the Power of Us hub, but it is a very valuable community. There are user groups for different types of functionality. It's fantastic for asking questions and finding out more information. But within the Power of Us hub, there is a group which is specific to the non-profit success pack releases. So you'll find out bugs that are being fixed and what's happening with the release schedule. So it's quite interesting to join that group just to see what's being fixed. And then there is a very informative article also on the Power of Us hub, which gives a lot of information, not just about the MPSP releases, but also the thrice yearly Salesforce upgrades as well. Okay. So moving on to just to reiterate how to manage that, any changes that are needed with that release schedule. As I said before, it's worth using sandboxes to test what is any changes that are coming into your organization. And if you're using change sets, I always keep a spreadsheet which keeps track of what needs to be included in a change set, because it can be tricky to keep track of exactly what has changed within a release. If you're doing large complex releases, then something more comprehensive than a spreadsheet may be necessary. But I think largely for our client base, a spreadsheet is quite sufficient. And then a couple more articles there about how to manage this change. And as I said before, it's well worth being familiar with the release schedule, because there are some limits when you're in the preview window of your sandbox being on one release and the production org being on another. There can be issues with some changes being deployed, so it's well worth just being familiar with what's being released when. Okay, so that is managing new changes coming into the Salesforce platform. Out of interest, how many of you are currently using Salesforce Classic?
Only for a little bit of, like, what if you can't do it on Lightning, then we just switch to Classic, but otherwise only Lightning.
Yeah. Are most of you on Lightning now? I think you'll find that from what I've seen of our client base, there seems to be quite a mixture of people using Salesforce and Classic. There really is a big push to get people to start using Lightning. Increasingly, with every release that's coming out, more features are released only on the Lightning platform. It's constantly being enhanced. So if you haven't already migrated to Lightning, it's well worth starting that journey. And to encourage, as part of that, Salesforce really is making it easier and easier to migrate. There's a migration assistant underneath the setup menu, which will help you step through what's required, what needs to be changed within your organization, because there may be some items that need to be reconfigured. You can preview what that's going to look like, and as I said, optimize it so that you're making the most of the features that are available within Salesforce that are available within Lightning, rather than just porting what you've got directly from Classic into Lightning. You can make the most of features that are only available within Lightning, such as embedding certain components within a page layout and some layout configuration which is only available in Lightning. And the process for switching over is to use this migration assistant to help you prepare and find out what needs to be reconfigured. To then enable this is all underneath the setup menu, and the migration assistant will step you through a wizard to undertake the preparation steps, then to switch on Salesforce Lightning, and then this doesn't need to be a big bang approach where Lightning is switched on and everyone is moved over on day one and that's it. You may choose to switch users over incrementally. It can be helpful to move people team by team so that they can be trained and so that you can handle any issues that are arising with their specific area of the system, sort of team one at a time. Salesforce also provide reports for monitoring who is actively using Lightning and who is switching back and forth from Lightning to Classic, which it's well worth monitoring those, because if there are as you just said, if there are reasons for switching between Classic and Lightning, it may be that some reconfiguration of your Lightning screens will allow users to complete their job entirely within Lightning, particularly as more features are being released with every each of Salesforce's scheduled releases. Okay, then having switched on Lightning, it's not sort of a it's not a one-stop, everything's done. There are new features being released all of the time. There is there's the constant need for user feedback. Oh, and there's a I just wanted to ask, is Subodh on the webinar? No, unfortunately. Oh, yes, you are. Hi, Subodh. I don't know if you're finding this useful, because I think you're in the process of switching over to Lightning at the moment. So if we have a quick look at, hi, Subodh.
Hi.
Hi. I'm not entirely sure where you're at with your Lightning journey at the moment. Is this topic helpful to you at the moment?
It is. It's very helpful. We're actually moving tomorrow.
Ah, perfect.
So Martin gave us the training a few weeks ago. We've got it through our team, and everyone's been briefed upon the changes, and so they can still use Classic, which they're quite happy about. But I've told them we should be moving to Lightning as much as possible now.
Yes, as the other user said, I do find myself switching back and forth every now and again. But if we just have a quick look, so if I switch back into Classic and then go into the setup menu, then we can see, well, there's this brief here to check readiness, and then that also will take you to the same place as this Lightning migration assistant here. And if we check readiness, this will then start the this will then give us a readiness report with recommendations as to which I think I might have sorry, wrong window, here we go. And then that readiness report gives recommendations about items that can be reconfigured, and advice on the journey of migration. Okay. So popping back into there. Now I'm trying to go back to where I was. Okay, and then we can get back into the migration wizard. So it steps you through all of the resources that are available for migrating. That check readiness is the report that we've just done. We can preview how it looks and make any configuration changes. Optimize features that are only available in Classic that you may be interested in. And then the last step is to enable Salesforce, which is this one here. Now there's a new setting that came out in the most recent release, that you can prevent people from switching between Classic and Lightning. I don't think there are any orgs that are probably at the stage where they're completely ready to do that, because there may still be some use cases where people do need to switch back and forth. But as an encouragement, you can switch people on a daily or weekly basis back to Lightning, just to sort of nudge them into using Salesforce.
Can I just ask,
and then when you're ready, yeah.
So are the features from standard are now all in Lightning? Because we found, for example, difficult to update, for example, something in campaigns like adding extra objects or something, or like fields. We were not able to change it in Lightning, so we had to switch to standard, for example, to do some changes in setup.
Okay. The vast majority of features are available, and off the top of my head I can't tell you any that aren't. And as I said, it is changing with every release. So we're sort of a few weeks to a month into the Winter 19 release. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. If you've got something specific, then drop me an email. With regard to adding objects and fields, that should be fine.
Maybe we just couldn't find it.
Yeah, so that might be something that can be fixed reasonably quickly and easily, just with ensuring that your layouts are set out correctly. And even with the Winter 19 release, the page layouts have improved in a couple of ways. So just if I switch back into, let's pop back into the app for a second. So the two big improvements are that there are now two. We can go from the comfy layout, which is
I use that.
Yeah, or the more compact one, which I find infinitely preferable, where things are a bit more
the new one.
condensed. Yeah, because that was something that I found a little. That I didn't like so much with the old one. Yeah, exactly. You need a bit more on the page, so it condenses items on the page. And another item is that you can put filters into a related list. So where, so I'm not sure. Let's pop back into accounts actually. Where you've got related lists, you can, where you add a related list to a page layout. So there's the message about how to change the density of your layout. Edit page. If you add I was hoping I can do this quickly on the fly. If we add a single related list, let's hope I can also get it to work as well. Can I add that into there? Yes, I'm just being too impatient. Yeah. Oh, it's because I need to do a whole new tab, actually, isn't it? But when you add a related list, you can add a filter to a single related list, so that, for example, if you're using multiple opportunity record types, you could have a
so for example,
list for donations,
membership or donations.
Yes, so you could, underneath account, you could have a membership list, and you could have a donations list, and a grants list, which I think is a new feature for the Winter 19 release. So another incentive for moving across to Lightning. Okay, but if you want to get in touch about some particular layout issues or problems, then I can double check if there's something specific that's missing from Lightning. Because I said there are a couple of things, but off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specific. Okay.
Great, thank you.
So if we leave that page, so that was just stepping through the migration assistant. Sorry. So if we switch that on, and then there should be. Oh, set up users, that's actually on the previous page. To switch, in addition to enabling Lightning, you do need to migrate individual users. So you can select 200 users at a time and actually migrate them across to, is that not switching? Oh, it's because they've already been migrated, that's why. So you can see here this tick, these users have already been moved to Lightning. And the others might not be active, which is why we can't move them across. Okay, so enable Lightning and switch and migrate your users across. And as we've seen, you can switch back and forth. So there's no risk to enabling it. it's just a question of ensuring your users are prepared and supported with moving across. Okay, so that's probably the most major feature which older orgs may not be utilising, but there are a couple of other items which have been added to Salesforce in recent years, so more established orgs might not be using them currently, these features are both mentioned in the Optimizer report, but I wanted to highlight them because I think they are quite significant. The first one of those is files, which a few years ago when I first started using Salesforce, all file-based content had to go into the attachments object. And there's limited access control over attachments. If you can see an object, you can see the attachments underneath it. And then more recently, Salesforce have introduced the files object, which offers much more granular security. It also means that a single file can be related to multiple objects. So you can have one file that is related to an account, a contact, and an opportunity. And another advantage is that if you use file-based content a lot rather than records, you may find that it uses up, your file storage limit gets used up quickly. Whereas if you switch from attachments to files, then you can use a cloud-based system such as SharePoint or Dropbox or Google Drive, and you can actually keep your files stored in that place, but still link them into Salesforce exactly as you would with normal files that are stored within the Salesforce cloud by using a component called Files Connect.
And that basically helps us not use the Salesforce limit on the file, yes?
Exactly, yes. So you've only got a certain amount of file storage space. And therefore, if the file itself is stored on your other cloud, the Google Cloud or Microsoft Cloud, it's not using up your file storage. The difference is virtually invisible to your users because there's still a record within a files record within Salesforce, but when you click on it to open the file, it's actually retrieving the file from SharePoint or wherever, rather than retrieving it from the Salesforce cloud. So if you do find that you're nearing your storage limit, or if you would actually like to be storing bigger files within Salesforce, it's well worth looking at Files Connect, which can be set up reasonably easily. One thing is, if you are currently using attachments, there's a migration process for getting from attachments to files. So there is a utility on App Exchange which can make it easier to migrate the files from the content from attachments to files, and then the page layouts and so forth will need reconfiguring. As I said, these items are both mentioned in the Optimizer report, but I wanted to highlight them. And the other item is the My Domain. I don't know who's is familiar or not familiar with My Domain, but you can know instantly whether or not you're using it because your Salesforce URL will either look like this first one with the generic EU and then a number, or for Europe, or NA and then a number, or as we have economic change, our system has got economicchange.my.salesforce.com. And there are a couple of features which which require My Domain to be activated. It's very straightforward to set up. There are only a couple of checks that need to be done first, because it's possible that, say, you've got formula fields in your system which have got the full domain hard-coded into them if it's sort of drilling down to a particular object, for example. But it's very straightforward to check and to implement, and is well worth putting in place. There is a help article at the bottom there. It's something that we can support with if you would like. It's reasonably straightforward, but if it's a unfamiliar concept, you may want to ask a few questions first. Okay. So, and then lastly, just to emphasize that this sort of keeping your org clean is not just a one-off, oh, I've run my reports, I've had a check, that's it. Salesforce is constantly evolving. The configuration, the data, the users, it's got all of these moving parts. So keeping your healthy org is a constant process. In terms of, I've worked in organisations in the past where the organisation has grown rapidly, so they've got an awful lot of config, an awful lot of data. And when you go into the setup menu, it's very hard to find the information that you need, because some things have been inactivated, some things haven't, but they're not being used anymore. The setup menu as a whole was very hard to navigate and became very sluggish. Alongside that, if you've got validation rules or workflow rules that have been inactive for months or years because you're not using that automation anymore, don't be afraid to delete things. If you're not going to reactivate them, and yes, deactivate something when you're first changing it, so that if you find that causes problems, you can reactivate it. But if sometime later down the track, everything's running smoothly and you know you're not going to be using that automation or that validation rule anymore, then delete it. It just causes a lot of clutter and makes it much harder to maintain the org. Similarly, if you've got fields that are no longer being used, there's a couple of utilities you can use to actually analyze your system and will provide a report of these are all the fields that have no data in or haven't been used recently, and they can be a very good starting point for working out if they're obsolete fields, or maybe your system is no longer being used as it was intended. So that's a handy way of working out if there are some fields which should maybe be removed. And it's worth, on data management, which, as I said, is probably a webinar in itself, it's well worth just having a suite of reports that you can run quickly and easily to check that your data is as you expect it to be. And that includes things like exception reports. So I think it's quite instinctive to run a report to make sure maybe that all of your active members are paid up or something like that. So comparing their membership status with payment status. But exception reports can get overlooked, which is things like, I've got all of these accounts, but these accounts haven't, it's looking at missing data. So accounts without contacts, which again, it's well worth including in your suite of data quality reports. Does anybody have any questions? No, as I said, I had been hoping to have time to run through the optimizer report, but as we've reached the end of the session, what I will do is I'll pop the sample report into Litmus along with the webinar content. I would recommend that you all run this report in your own orgs and have a look at the results. So here, for example, is it's worth looking at users who either may no longer be working for your organisation or who aren't actively using Salesforce. So it's well worth running this report and flipping through the content yourself. And do get in touch if there are items which aren't clear or if you'd like to discuss further. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and look forward to speaking to you next month and interacting on the chatter group in the meantime. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.